My father slid the 30-day eviction notice through my apartment door at exactly 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. I heard the paper scraping against the floor, saw his shadow through the peephole. He didn't knock. Didn't call beforehand. Just slipped the paper under like I was any other tenant who'd missed rent. Mrs. Kowalski from across the hall was getting her newspaper. She watched the whole thing, her face a mixture of pity and secondhand embarrassment. My father saw her too. He straightened his jacket, nodded politely like he'd just delivered mail instead of kicking out his unemployed daughter. I picked up the notice with shaking hands. Official letterhead. Legal language. 30 days to vacate the premises. No exceptions for family. No grace period for the fact that I'd lost my job 3 weeks ago and was actively interviewing. I opened the door while he was still walking down the hallway. "Okay," I called after him. My voice was steadier than I felt. "You'll see." He didn't turn around. Just kept walking, his keys jingling in his pocket. I closed the door and pulled out my phone, dialing the number for the community legal clinic I'd seen advertised at the unemployment office. The layoff exit meeting had been quick and impersonal. A cardboard box for my desk belongings. The click of my security badge being deactivated. My boss couldn't make eye contact, just mumbled something about restructuring and budget cuts while HR pushed severance papers across the table. I'd worked in their HR department for 6 years. Helped design their employee retention programs. Now I was retention statistics myself. Walking out of that building with my box of belongings felt like a public execution. Coworkers I'd had lunch with last week suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. Nobody said goodbye except Becca from accounting, who squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "I'm sorry." In my car, I'd opened my banking app. The balance read $143.17. An automatic debit for my phone bill was scheduled for midnight. My savings account, drained 2 months ago when my mom got sick and needed help with medical bills, showed $0. I'd driven straight to my apartment, the one I rented from my father in his triplex building. I'd planned to ask for a 2-week extension on rent. Maybe offer to do building maintenance in exchange. Instead, I found the eviction notice 3 days later. My name is Olivia Parker. I'm 29 years old, white, living in Columbus, Ohio. For most of my adult life, I'd been the fixer child. The one who helped Dad manage his rental properties when tenants called with problems. The one who'd co-signed my younger brother's car loan. The one who'd organized Mom's care before she passed. Now I was the problem that needed fixing. My rent was 8 days overdue. Not by choice, but by mathematics. I'd paid what I could, which was exactly $143.17. And promised the remaining $450 by the end of the week once my severance check cleared. My father's response had been the eviction notice. I sat on my apartment floor, the notice in one hand and my phone in the other. My brother Tyler hadn't answered any of my calls in 3 days. My aunt had sent a sympathetic text but no offers of help. My father owned this building and 2 others. He wasn't struggling. He just believed in tough love and personal responsibility. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad, no exceptions. "Don't make me the bad guy." I stared at those words until they blurred. Then I screenshot them and saved them in a folder labeled Documentation. The hallway trial happened 3 days later. My father knocked on every apartment in the building, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. He explained the situation like he was teaching a lesson. His daughter had failed to pay rent on time, and consequences matter, even for family. "I treat everyone fairly here," he announced to Mrs. Kowalski and the college students in Unit 2. "No special treatment. That's how you run a good building." I stood in my doorway, swallowing fury. My face burned with humiliation. The college students wouldn't look at me. Mrs. Kowalski shook her head sadly but didn't argue. After he left, I photographed the eviction notice carefully. Every word, every signature, the date stamp. I noticed something I'd missed before, a statute number at the top, printed in small font. I didn't recognize it, but I wrote it down. That evening, I looked it up. The statute referenced tenant protections in cases of owner-occupied buildings. My father lived in the duplex next door, not in this triplex. The notice cited the wrong legal code. It was a small error. Probably meaningless. But I added it to my documentation folder anyway. The community legal clinic operated out of a converted house near downtown. I showed up on my first day as a volunteer, desperate to learn anything that might help me understand my rights. A paralegal named Carmen showed me around, pointing to filing cabinets full of tenant-landlord cases. Most disputes come down to documentation, she explained. Who kept better records usually wins. She handed me a 3-ring binder. Start here. Ohio Revised Code on Residential Tenancies. I spent 4 hours that first day reading statutes about eviction procedures, security deposits, and landlord obligations. The language was dense and technical, but I highlighted everything that seemed relevant. During a break, I was making copies of sample forms when I noticed something on the copier glass. Someone had left a document about land contracts, deed transfers, and property assignments. I'd never read those terms closely before. They seemed like abstract concepts for people with money. I made a copy anyway, adding it to my growing collection of legal information. I didn't know why yet. Just instinct. I needed income immediately, so I took an evening job at a property management company across town. My role was showing vacant units, logging maintenance requests, and answering tenant calls. The work was humbling. I'd spent years in corporate HR, and now I was walking people through studio apartments and explaining how the parking lot gates worked. But I listened when tenants talked. Heard their stories about broken leases and impossible rent increases and landlords who ignored repair requests. The property manager, a woman named Casey Quinn who used they/them pronouns, noticed me taking notes during a particularly difficult conversation with a tenant facing eviction. You actually care, Casey observed after the tenant left. I'm living it, I admitted. My dad's evicting me from his building. Casey studied me thoughtfully. Banks don't want buildings, they said quietly. They want payments. When the payments stop, opportunities appear. They handed me a business card for a real estate finance workshop. Might be useful. I pocketed the card, not sure what they meant but sensing it was important. Moving day came exactly 30 days after the notice. I packed 3 cardboard boxes, clothes, kitchen essentials, my laptop, a few books. Everything else I'd sold online or donated. My grandmother's antique lamp had gone for $80 to help cover gas and food. Mrs. Kowalski found me loading boxes into my car. She pressed a $20 bill and a folded note into my hand. You were kind to me when my husband died, she whispered. When everyone else rushed past. The note read, good people don't stay down forever. I slept on my friend Hannah's futon that night, staring at the ceiling and doing mental math. Hannah could host me for maybe 2 weeks before it became awkward. I had exactly 1 paycheck coming from the property management job. My severance was nearly gone. I stuck a post-it note on Hannah's coffee table where I could see it first thing every morning, 12 months solvency. 12 months to get stable. 12 months to prove I wasn't the failure my father's eviction implied. I built a budget on Hannah's kitchen table, writing numbers in columns until they balanced. Rent for a room somewhere, $400. Food, $200. Gas, $60. Phone, $45. That left $95 from my biweekly paycheck for everything else. It wasn't enough. I needed more income or fewer expenses, preferably both. I sold more belongings. My grandmother's jewelry box, the nice kitchen mixer I'd gotten for Christmas, my collection of hardcover books. I kept only the dented kettle she'd given me before she died, the one that whistled off-key but still boiled water perfectly. An email notification pinged on my phone, Affordable Housing Finance 101, online webinar tomorrow, $49. $49 I didn't have. But Casey had mentioned real estate finance, and something in my gut said this was important. I registered using the last of my credit card limit and told myself it was an investment. The webinar was scheduled for tomorrow evening. I had no idea it would change everything. A pipe burst in my father's triplex during a cold snap in January. I heard about it from Mrs. Kowalski, who'd texted me even though I no longer lived there. Water was flooding the basement. My father was banging on doors, swearing about repair costs and tenant complaints. I knew a reliable plumber from my property management job. Someone who charged fairly and showed up fast. I texted my father the name and number. He left me on read. 3 hours later, Mrs. Kowalski texted again. He hired someone expensive who can't come until tomorrow. Water still running. I called the plumber myself, explained the situation, and gave him my father's address. Tell him Olivia Parker sent you. He'll pay you. Eventually. The plumber fixed it that evening. My father never thanked me, never acknowledged I'd helped. But I screenshot the text exchange anyway, adding it to my documentation folder that was growing thicker by the week. I'd been volunteering at the legal clinic for 3 months when something unusual crossed my desk. I was sorting mail in the clinic's cramped mailroom when I noticed several default letters from the same regional bank. Notices about missed mortgage payments, cure periods, and potential foreclosure proceedings. One of the letters had my father's lender's name on it. Not his personally, not yet. But I recognized the bank logo, the format of the letter, the language they used. I made copies of the sample letters, studying the timeline they outlined. First missed payment. Second missed payment. Notice of default. Cure period. Intent to accelerate. The progression was methodical and predictable. Back at my property management job that evening, Casey pulled me aside. A regional bank is unloading distressed notes next quarter, they said quietly. Mostly small multifamily properties. Owners who got in over their heads with interest-only loans. My hands went cold. Interest only? Balloon payments come due eventually, Casey explained. When owners can't refinance and can't pay, the bank wants them gone. They'll sell the note at a discount just to clear the books. I nodded slowly, my mind racing with possibilities I didn't fully understand yet. My cousin's birthday party should have been safe neutral ground. Instead, it became another humiliation. My father held court at the dining table, telling everyone about the importance of tough love and teaching responsibility. Sometimes you have to let people hit bottom, he announced, glancing at me. That's how they learn. My aunt changed the subject quickly. My cousins studied their plates. My brother Tyler, who'd barely spoken to me in months, mumbled something about getting more ice. As I was leaving, my aunt followed me to the car. She pressed a folded napkin into my hand. Don't open this until you're home, she whispered. In Hannah's bathroom later, I unfolded the napkin. Written in my aunt's careful handwriting, he refinanced last spring. Balloon payment due in 24 months. He's terrified but won't admit it. 24 months from last spring meant the balloon was due in roughly 18 months from now. I pulled out my phone and started researching balloon mortgages, interest-only loans, and what happened when property owners couldn't make their final payments. The picture that emerged made my stomach drop and my pulse race at the same time. The webinar on affordable housing finance had seemed boring at first. An instructor droning about servicing rights, note assignments, deed in lieu agreements. But slowly, the language started clicking into place like puzzle pieces. Default meant missed payments. Nod meant notice of default. Workout meant negotiating with the borrower. Deal meant deed in lieu of foreclosure, where the owner voluntarily surrenders the property. REO meant real estate owned, the bank's final step. I sketched a flowchart on notebook paper, default nod workout DL REO. One path kept drawing my attention, the workout phase. The point where the bank wanted solutions, not problems. The point where a borrower drowning in debt might accept help from an unexpected source. I circled that part of the flowchart twice, my pen pressing hard enough to indent the paper beneath. This was the leverage point. The moment where someone with knowledge and a small amount of capital could step in and solve everyone's problem. The bank would get their money. The borrower would avoid foreclosure. And the new owner would get the property at a discount. I started taking notes faster, filling pages with calculations and possibilities. At my property management job, I started negotiating payment plans for tenants who'd fallen behind. Small successes, convincing a single mother to pay $100 now and $100 next week instead of nothing at all. Helping an elderly man navigate rental assistance programs. One property owner called me personally to say thank you. You actually solved the problem instead of just filing for eviction. We need more people like you. Casey overheard the call. They pulled me into their office afterward. If you had capital, they said thoughtfully, you'd be dangerous. Want to learn the business side? I'll give you extra hours plus mentorship. Yes, I said immediately. Casey nodded. Start with understanding how deals actually work. Not the fantasy version people see on TV. The real version, with real numbers and real risk. Over the next 3 months, Casey taught me to read property financial statements, calculate cap rates, and identify value-add opportunities. But more than that, they taught me to think like an investor instead of a victim. Documentation plus patience equals power, Casey said one evening. Remember that. I built a spreadsheet in secret, working on it late at night on Hannah's couch after she'd gone to bed. Local addresses. Property records pulled from the county auditor's website. Tax delinquency status. Mortgage recording dates. I searched my father's name and found all 3 of his properties. The triplex where I'd lived. A duplex on the east side. A single-family rental near the university. The triplex entry made my breath catch, interest-only structure, refinanced 18 months ago, balloon payment due in roughly 12 months. I starred the parcel ID number. Saved the file with a password. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. This wasn't revenge. This was survival. My father had taught me that consequences matter, that business is business, that family doesn't mean special treatment. I was simply learning the lesson he'd insisted on teaching. The voicemail came on a Thursday. My father's voice, tight with anger. I heard you're poking around property records, asking questions. Stay out of my business, Olivia. I mean it. Someone had told him I'd been researching real estate finance. Maybe my aunt, maybe my brother, maybe just small-town gossip making its way back to him. I listened to the message 3 times. Then I deleted it and opened a new document on my laptop, Parker Street LLC, Operating Agreement, Draft. If I was going to do this, I'd do it correctly. Legally. Professionally. Not as a daughter seeking revenge, but as a business person identifying an opportunity. I researched LLC formation requirements in Ohio. Registered agent rules. Operating agreement templates. The cost was $99 to file, money I didn't have yet but would find somehow. Over the next week, I picked up extra shifts at work, sold my last few valuable possessions, and opened a separate bank account. On the Friday before my 30th birthday, I filed the paperwork for Parker Street LLC. My father's building sat on Parker Street. The irony wasn't lost on me. I needed a partner. Someone with more capital than my meager savings. Someone who understood the risks and the ethical implications of what I was proposing. I pitched the idea to Casey over coffee one morning before work. Small scale, ethical buy and hold strategy, I explained. We target distressed notes from banks ready to cut losses. We offer workouts to borrowers before foreclosure destroys their credit. Everyone wins. Casey listened without interrupting. When I finished, they were quiet for a long moment. This is about your dad's building, they said finally. Not a question, a statement. It's about several buildings, I corrected. His is just one option. Casey pulled out their phone and opened a banking app. I've got $20,000 I can invest if the numbers work. But we do this right. No revenge plays. No emotional decisions. Pure business. Pure business, I agreed. 2 days later, we got pre-approval for a small commercial loan. Combined with Casey's investment and my savings, we had enough capital to make an offer if the note discount was steep enough. We were in range. Barely, but enough. The bank's asset management office was in a sterile building downtown. Gray carpets, fluorescent lights, coffee that tasted like it had been made yesterday. I sat across from a portfolio manager named Kyle who looked bored until I explained what we were looking for. Distressed multifamily notes, I said. 3 to 6 units. Columbus metro area. We can close fast with cash. Kyle perked up. He pulled out a folder and flipped through several properties. Most of these are heading to auction. But if you can close before that. He tapped one file. Triplex on Parker Street. Non-performing loan. Balloon payment missed 2 months ago. Owners in denial. Interested? My heart hammered against my ribs. I kept my face neutral. Send me the details. We'll review and respond within 48 hours. Outside in my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, breathing slowly until my hands stopped shaking. This was it. The opportunity I'd been working toward for 18 months. The moment my father's tough love became the rope he'd used to hang himself. Due diligence meant walking the property, checking every detail before making an offer. I went at dawn, before my father would be awake, before tenants would ask questions. I walked the alley behind the building, checked the utility meters, noted the condition of the roof and siding. Then I knocked on doors, identifying myself as someone from the bank doing a routine check. Mrs. Kowalski let me in immediately. Your father hasn't fixed anything in months, she said. The pressure valve in the basement makes a terrible noise. I've told him 3 times. I went to the basement and found the issue, a faulty pressure relief valve on the water heater. Cheap to fix if done now, expensive if it failed and caused damage. More importantly, it was a code violation that could trigger a citation if reported. I took photos, made notes, and added the repair cost to my calculations. This wasn't a problem. This was a value-add opportunity. Fix it immediately after purchase, avoid the citation, keep the tenants happy. The building was worth saving. My father was letting it deteriorate through neglect and denial. Casey and I submitted our offer on a Monday morning. We went conservative, 60 cents on the dollar of the outstanding loan balance. The bank countered at 70 cents. We held our position, explaining we needed margin for immediate repairs and potential tenant turnover. The asset manager called on Wednesday. If you can close by month end, it's yours at your price. We want this off our books. Month end was 10 business days away. Casey and I spent the next week assembling our financing stack. The pre-approval was solid. We qualified for a small grant from a community development fund because we'd committed to keeping the building affordable housing. My personal savings, every dollar I'd scraped together over 18 months, went into the deal. Then, 3 days before closing, a problem emerged. The title officer called with bad news: there's a prior lien on the property. A contractor filed a mechanic's lien for unpaid work last year. We can't clear the title until it's resolved. My stomach dropped. We had 72 hours to close. What are my options? I asked. Get a deed in lieu from the current owner. That transfers the property voluntarily and lets us clear most liens faster. Which meant I needed to talk to my father. I knocked on my father's door at noon on a Thursday, dressed professionally, carrying a folder of documents. I'd rehearsed this conversation for weeks, planned every word to stay businesslike instead of emotional. He answered in sweatpants and an old shirt, looking older and more tired than I remembered. What do you want? I have a business proposition, I said. Can I come in? He let me in reluctantly. I sat at his kitchen table and laid out 3 options. Full reinstatement of the loan if he could find the money somewhere, a short payoff if he could negotiate with the bank, or a deed in lieu where he signed over the property voluntarily in exchange for relocation money and avoiding foreclosure on his record. He stared at the papers, his face going from confusion to anger to something that looked like fear. "This is you," he said slowly. "You're the buyer." "My LLC is the buyer," I corrected. "Through the bank's note sale program." He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "You're doing this to punish me." "I'm doing this because it's good business." I slid the bank's letterhead across the table, showing where Parker Street LLC was listed as the assigned buyer. "You taught me that family doesn't mean special treatment." My father called me a traitor. Said I was using his troubles against him. Said no real daughter would do this to her father. I stayed calm. I'd practiced this too. The deed in lieu spares you the foreclosure record. You walk away with money for a deposit somewhere else. The alternative is the bank forecloses, it goes on your credit report, and you get nothing. How long have you been planning this? His voice shook. I've been surviving, I replied. You evicted me when I lost my job. I learned to document everything, understand property finance, and recognize opportunities. You taught me these lessons. He started to argue, then stopped. His eyes moved to the pile of unopened mail on his counter. I recognized the format of several envelopes: code violation notice, tax delinquency warning, final notice from the utility company. He was farther gone than I'd realized. Not just the missed balloon payment, but months of cascading problems he'd been ignoring or hiding. You're going to lose this building anyway, I said quietly. The question is whether you lose it on your terms or the bank's. He said he'd fight. I slid a timeline across the table showing exactly how many days he had before foreclosure proceedings began. 2 days later, my father signed the deed in lieu agreement. His jaw was clenched the entire time, his signature angry and sharp. But he signed. The title company processed it immediately. Casey and I closed on the property that same afternoon. By evening, I owned the building where my father had evicted me 18 months earlier. My first act as owner was scheduling the pressure valve repair. A plumber arrived the next morning and fixed it for $240, averting a potential code citation that could have cost thousands in fines. My father was technically still a resident. The deed in lieu included a transition clause giving him 60 days to relocate. But when I asked where he planned to go, his face crumbled. I don't know, he admitted. I don't have first and last month's rent saved. I pulled out a document I'd prepared, a standard 1-year lease for his current unit, same rent he'd been paying on his mortgage, with a 60-day grace period to find alternative housing if he wanted it. You taught me that business is business, I said. So here's the business arrangement. No special treatment. Just the lease terms I'd offer any tenant. He stared at the paper like it might bite him. I spent the first week as the new owner doing everything right. Met with each tenant personally. Explained the ownership change. Fixed the pressure valve, repaired the loose stair rail that had been a safety hazard for months, and posted my contact information in the lobby. Mrs. Kowalski cried when I fixed her leaking faucet the same day she reported it. Your father always said he'd get to it eventually. The college students in Unit 2 asked about renewing their lease. We like living here, one of them said. We just wished someone cared about maintenance. I installed a shared laundry plan, splitting the cost of new machines with Casey. Painted the hallway. Cleaned out the storage area. Basic improvements that made the building feel cared for instead of abandoned. Meanwhile, Casey and I closed on an adjacent duplex using the same model. Another distress note, another workout with the owner, another property saved from foreclosure. Parker Street LLC was becoming real. Not a revenge fantasy, but an actual business. My father lingered in the hallway one evening while I was checking the furnace. Do you feel good about this? He asked. His voice was softer than I'd heard it in years. I feel good about boundaries, I replied. And about building something sustainable. 6 months later, I sat in my tiny office above a coffee shop downtown. My business license hung framed on the wall. I'd hired 2 part-time staff members, one to handle maintenance requests, one to help with bookkeeping. The tenants at the Parker Street building sent me a thank you card signed by everyone. "Best landlord we've ever had," Mrs. Kowalski had written. "You actually care." My father paid his rent on time every month, always on the first, never late. We didn't speak beyond necessary landlord-tenant communication. He'd asked once if we could have dinner, talk things through. I'd said maybe someday, but not yet. The hurt was still too fresh. The memory of that eviction notice sliding under my door, the public humiliation, the months of struggling while he told everyone it was for my own good. But I'd learned something valuable from the experience. Documentation is mercy in advance. Every lease I signed now had clear terms. Every repair request got logged and tracked. Every tenant got treated with the same standards, no exceptions, no special treatment. My father had taught me that lesson. He just hadn't expected me to learn it so well. I made myself tea in my office kitchenette using my grandmother's dented kettle. It still whistled off-key. Still boiled water perfectly. Still reminded me of who I'd been when this all started. Broke, homeless, humiliated, and determined to prove I was more than my circumstances. Parker Street LLC now owned 4 properties. All of them formerly distressed, all of them now stable and well-maintained. Casey and I had developed a reputation for ethical workouts that saved owners from foreclosure while providing us with solid investments. I wasn't rich. But I was solvent. More than that, I was proud of what I'd built from nothing but determination and documentation. My phone buzzed with a text from Casey. New opportunity just hit the market. 6-unit building. Same model. Interested? I smiled and typed back, "Send me the numbers." Outside my window, I could see the Parker Street building 3 blocks away. My father's car was in the parking lot. He'd be inside his apartment, living in the building he used to own, paying rent to the daughter he'd evicted. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired and older and maybe a little sad about how we'd gotten here. But I also felt something else, certain. Certain that I'd done the right thing. Certain that protecting myself wasn't the same as being vindictive. Certain that sometimes the best response to tough love is tougher boundaries. I locked my office and headed home, landlord not orphan, business owner not victim, exactly who I'd needed to become to survive what he'd taught me. The kettle whistled in my bag. I'd make tea when I got home. From my own kitchen, in my own apartment, that nobody could take away.